Okay. Well, thanks for coming tonight, everybody. We are very excited to all be together this evening and wrap up our PMEA Cares series with specifically geared this time to new teachers. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Tonight's format's going to be open discussion, so please feel free to jump in whenever you want. It's probably easiest to unmute, but if you're more comfortable chatting, I'll try my best to keep an eye on that. And anybody that sees anything in the chat box that should be brought up, please feel free to shout it out right there. So I'm going to be asking some questions. If that sparks a question in anyone else's head that you want to throw out to the entire group, please do. Everybody ready? Okay, so here's the first one. I feel like I'm on The View or something. Okay, when you graduated, what job were you hoping to teach, and what job did you end up teaching? Go.
All right, I'll go first. As someone who was an instrumental major on clarinet, I expected myself to be a high school band director, which I think that a lot. And people, that's their goal, to teach high school. And my first job was teaching chorus, middle school and high school chorus, and middle school general music at a rural school district, very rural, in Greene County, which borders West Virginia.
Anyone else want to share theirs?
I will.
Okay.
I was really lucky. I was actually looking for a middle school position. When I got out of school, I was probably the only person I knew that was looking for middle school. Everyone wanted to be a high school band director. I'm instrumental. So I fell into a middle school instrumental position. So I was lucky.
Yeah, you were. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm one of those people that they invented that poem, The Road Not Taken. And I took the path less. I was going to try to get a job when I graduated in 1978. I'm the youngest teacher on this panel here, right? And so getting a job was more important than anything else. Edgewood, a school district that is very small, 75 kids in a graduating class say, hey, we have a job and you have 3 days to decide if you want it. And I picked it, and there are all these other big positions. I wanted to be a string teacher, maybe a band director, because those were my two strong areas. I could play the piano, and then boom, I'm a general music teacher, K to 12, for 2 years. And then Upper St. Clair popped around and said, hey, we have a string job. Are you still interested? And I moved over to Upper St. Clair, and then the wisdom of my superintendent at the time said, well, we'll let you do it for 1 year, but after that, you're the high school choir director. And I had never taught in a choir. I had never actually sung in a choir in high school or in college. I was always a violist in the pit. Now, 16 years after that, yeah, I was a musical director, producer. They let me go back to do my string program, but I was very much into music education. Good story in the respect that I became a well-rounded teacher, and basically anything was thrown my way, I was having to figure out how to do it. The only area I did not teach eventually was jazz ensemble. Won't want to do that.
So, and I can take it that everybody survived their first position, regardless of if it was your dream job or not, right? So I think that's the takeaway from that. Okay, moving on. What was your toughest personal, emotional, or pedagogical challenge in your first job? Personal, emotional, or pedagogical challenge? Go ahead, Sue.
Well, for me, it was going to a culture that was, although my school district is in suburban Philadelphia at the time, it was very rural. And for me, probably my toughest pedagogical challenge was being told, you do not have to teach a variety of cultures in music. I had gone to school in Philadelphia and gone on to Temple from there, where we had a very wide exposure to all kinds of cultures, religions, etc. And as I was starting to pick out music for my first winter concert, somebody said to me, you don't have to worry about programming Hanukkah music because that's just not something we do here. And that was a big shift in thing. That was a big surprise for me, because having grown up in a situation where, everybody's points of view, etc., cultures were all welcomed. And that took a lot of that was just like, that was a big a big shock for me, I guess emotionally and probably pedagogically, but certainly emotionally. I just was not prepared for that.
I'm shocked as well, just hearing the story. Anyone else want to share? You're muted, Michelle.
It was thundering here really bad, so so I was like, I'm gonna.
That means it'll be thundering here in about 5 minutes.
But, for me, it was very difficult for me socially, where I had my first teaching job. It was a very rural school district, about 2 hours, and it was the type of school that almost everyone that taught there, went to high school there, was born and raised there. And their idea of leisure activities did not match, and there was a real, disconnect from that community. And also for me, I went to IUP and being with my friends essentially 24/7, because you took all your classes together and you lived together and you ate your meals together. And as I moved on, but I still had friends that were younger than me that were still at school, that separation was really hard. And that was a hard transition for me to want to be in that music major life, because that's all that I had known, and to be part, and that they were still doing recitals and they were still, and what's the wind ensemble playing? Oh, I wish I would have gotten that. And the year after I graduated, the wind ensemble was at PMEA, and that was something I never got to do. And I would try to go to as many concerts, but it just wasn't the same experience being in the audience, and you feel like you were missing out on that. And I didn't really have many friends at the school as much as I tried, and it was a difficult struggle for me. And looking back now, I didn't, I think about my habits, and I was definitely in some form of a depression where I'd come home from school and I'd put on my pajamas, I'd have nachos and cheese whiz for supper, and by 6 o'clock I was in bed. And
Wait, we're not supposed to be doing that?
Well, now we can go a little, I don't know, we can upgrade our cheeses, I guess. But for me, that social was very, and I'm a very social person. And so that disconnect was really, really difficult for me. And I was there 1 year and I learned a lot about myself, but I also learned that was not the place that I saw in me spending the next 34 years. So it was a really great experience, but when I had the opportunity to come a little bit closer to home, that was the best decision for me personally, to just feel part of a community. But that was a real struggle for me. It was very difficult, and and you find that being closer in age to your students, there's that line, but I actually enjoyed talking to them more than some of the teachers, and right. So that was really probably my hardest struggle, just socially in a new area.
So I think that would be a good thing to actually maybe discuss for a second, because lots of times when you do get your first job, you move somewhere that you don't know anybody into a setting where you're going to see people day after day who already know everybody else. So maybe somebody could share with us a way that when you did get that first job, you were able to connect with the new people that you were surrounded with. So I think like one thing, depending on the area, obviously more difficult in a rural setting would be like find a place to perform, right? If you can find some other people to perform with, that would be nice. And putting yourself out there as far as being willing to accompany, if that's a skill set you have, or, offer music in some other ways, the local places of worship, or even just giving lessons, you can meet, parents and stuff that way as well. Does anybody have anything else that you can think of where you found yourself meeting new people? Go ahead, Katie.
I think it's interesting because my first job was in the same place where I student taught. And I experienced that loneliness when I student taught, because you get right out of, I went to Penn State, and then I was like on the end of the state, and I knew like one person. So my co-op, who was fortunately very friendly, connected me with some friends, like just some of the other music teachers there. And then so my first year teaching, I appreciate it more every year, just knowing how amazing these many mentors were. I was assigned a mentor through the school. I was assign, like, then of course my co-op, who is now the head marching band director when I was teaching elementary band, and I helped him out with marching band, so he was now a friend, and just he was and connecting with all the various people in the department, and people were really excited to see another female band director, so there was a little extra friendship there. But Terry, I really agree with getting to know people outside of the job, like attending a church, like seeing if there's some neighbors that are just interesting. I found out that one of my next door neighbors taught second grade in one of my buildings, and she ended up just being a really nice person to know. So that it's supposed to be hard, and that's how you grow as a person.
Well, and I would also encourage any new teachers out there that when you're invited, even for the smallest thing, like to go to lunch on in-service, just say yes. Even if don't consider yourself a social person, and in those situations you feel awkward in, you'll get over that the more you push yourself to do it. So, so what was something when you first started your career? I guess it doesn't have to be when you first started a career, but what was something that you thought that ended up being easier than you thought it was going to be? Now, don't be scared. They're taking their time because there's so many things to choose from. Something that was easier than you thought it was going to be.
You know, I'll speak to this. It seems like on a lot of these webinars, a lot of the younger teachers or pre-student teachers are really wrapped up in curriculum and design and things like that. And I was pretty much the same way also. However, what I found was once I was in my position, and you know who and what you're dealing with. So I think a lot of the younger teachers, when I was younger, was wrapped up in, you know, having a perfect curricula that you know, covers everything. But, you know, I didn't know what I was walking into yet. So, you know, once I walked into and I knew what I had to deal with, that came pretty easy for me. I was surprised how well I could evaluate what was there and what needed to be done. So that's
Yeah, I'm sure that'd be helpful to know that can come easily.
Yeah, it really did.
Good. I think something that I didn't even think about it until I just asked this question out loud, but I think the piano skills to teach general music is a lot easier than I thought it's a lot simpler than I thought it was going to be. And what I mean is you find yourself repeating the same style of accompaniment so frequently all day long, day after day, that it becomes second nature to you way more quickly than you could ever learn in a keyboard class. So if there's anybody out there that's stressing about their piano skills, don't get me wrong, they are very important, and you definitely want to be prepared for your interview and to use them in real life. But once you actually start using them, your skills improve incredibly drastically over a short amount of time. So I think that was easier than I thought it was going to be. Okay, how about, okay. If you could make a single purchase for your classroom and money was not an issue, what one purchase would you make? I had fun writing these questions. Go ahead, Katie.
I like that. I'm gonna like shoot for the stars because why not?
Put it out in the universe.
If I could do something, I would just get a whole new set of inventory of instruments for my program, because a lot of my instruments are from the 70s and they were purchased at high quality, and a lot of them are still working, but it's, yeah, that's the dream. There's lots of other things, but like if I have to really go for something, I have like 6 alto clarinets that I would not replace, and I would inventory things that I could actually use.
But is that because they burn well enough now?
This is the era of Robert Zellner and John Casagrande, and this is just a different time. But yeah, I think I actually gave one of them that was beyond repair, like truly beyond repair, to an artist who like took pieces of instruments and made a beautiful thing. So that's
really neat.
That was creative. But yeah, if I had I mean, I'm sure we could all spend all the money in the world if we could, but like my inventory is old, and teaching the kids to care for it, I guess, helps them learn how to care for the instrument. But it would be nice to not go, yes, you pressed the valve down too far. I'm gonna have to send that back because the valve is bent. So.
Anybody else? Come on, you know you want to answer it.
Okay. Like a huge marimba, really large marimba. But I have to be careful because I'm a middle school director. So, you know, I don't think I want to, I don't know. I'm not a percussionist, but I don't think I would want to buy a rosewood. But anyways, if money was no object and I was given that, just the large 7-octave marimba, I could put so many kids on that instrument. Unfortunately, those huge marimbas also take up a lot of space and tend to turn into tables, and that's the last thing you want to have.
So
That's what I would get.
before you said rosewood, I thought you were going to say you didn't want to encourage more percussionists. Anybody else?
I was going to say a comment on the marimba, but just I have one, and middle school students quickly figure out the how to play Minecraft. And like the little say from video games, but I started to jump in. I saw some hands, but my band room has no windows, so I would pay for it to be remodeled so I could open a window and see outside because it's on the back end of the building with nothing. So I think I would just do like a remodel that included some windows.
It's also kind of a hole in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's
yes, you've been there.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, they did finally remove the carpeting, and so I'm getting new flooring and paint. But I think I would just, you've been there, Terry, So I think so windows would make a big difference.
That would be mine too. It'd be a room remodel.
Yeah,
that would be mine. I saw some other people are going to jump in. Please go ahead. Whoever talks first.
Go ahead, Paul.
So I had to make those early decisions as a general music teacher. And did anyone ever buy a Rhythm Band Incorporated 30 bell set in a cabinet that had the most shrill and the most obnoxious sounds, but they had 30 of them, little soprano bells, xylophones. And so in my elementary teaching, I thought, well, this will be good. And we brought them all out and taught them how to use them. And yes, I was careful. This is how you use the mallets. And we started off with something simple, but 30 soprano bells that when they all played at the same time, I was losing my hearing. I still haven't received it back. I would have bought a decent Orff instrument if someone had come by but I've also purchased as a choir director, the Chicago in Concert arrangement by Jensen, publisher. And anybody who's a choir director here, I should have been taken out and shot for considering that purchase. The tenor parts, I was inexperienced. The tenor part is completely in falsetto for the entire piece. And my piano accompanist came up to me and said, Mr. Fox, are you planning to do this? And I said, no, this is a bad choice. I'm going to return it to Volkwines. And she said, well, I'll arrange you an arrangement for a Chicago in Concert. And that actually was the best thing that could have happened. A student arranged pianist who played it, arrangement for Chicago. Bad decisions, because you're so inexperienced. Hey, anybody that's in their first 10 years here on this call, you're going to do a lot of those. It's just part of the game.
Sue?
For me, I'm with Michelle on the room remodel, but more than anything, I would take 2 decent HVAC systems for my classrooms because I'll tell you, I have no heat and no air conditioning in one of them. So we're working with a space heater, and in the other one, I can't control the humidity. So right now, I'm sure school is god-awful humid, and in the winter, it gets very dry. So my stringed instruments fight the weather all the time.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I have all of the equipment I could possibly. I have beautiful equipment. It's less than 10. A lot of it's 10 years old, still in really good shape, and my kids have taken great care of it. but yeah, I could use honestly an HVAC system, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but
not at all. That sounds like I get it totally where you're coming from. Go ahead, Lisa.
All right, for me, it would have to be like my own set of iPads or some technology,
good
because I mean, we do have like the Quaver Essentials. So there are activities that I can have the kids on, but I can't ever get into a computer lab. And then, it's a nightmare to line them up and move them somewhere else. It's not your room, and they don't go to the computer lab with you, so they don't know how to behave in the lab with you. And so, yeah, it would definitely be my own set of iPads or Chromebooks or something.
Yeah, good answer. But I think, go ahead, Eric.
Can I talk about rooms for a second?
Yeah.
One of the best things I did in my career, I was offered some money to remodel my room. And my old room, and the reason why is my old room were those old tiered, concrete tiered rooms. And the best thing I did was had that filled in to a flat floor because of ADA compliance, because my band grew so large that, handicapped kids could not get in there, instruments could not get in there. So I know there's people on both sides of the fence or whatever, but for me, that was one of the best decisions that I ever did, was request the flat floor. Because we don't have to worry about, the handicapped kids anymore. And it was just downright dangerous, when I packed so many kids in that floor. I had kids falling off chairs and, the chairs falling off the wooden risers and things. That was...
But and if you haven't got my theme yet, see, no matter what we were faced with, we're all still doing it right. We all still survive. We all still manage and do a great job. So how about an interview question that surprised you? Where you didn't see it coming. Eric's smiling. He's got a good one.
It really isn't a question, but I had a really awesome experience. My first interview was with a principal, assistant superintendent, and maybe a teacher, if I can remember right. And I was in there, I did the whole interview, and they said, can you just hold on for a moment? After we were finished, I went out in the hallway. And then they said, can you meet with our school board and superintendent in 2 hours? So I was like, oh, okay. So it was kind of rapid like that. I drove 3.5 hours over here. And then the best part was that as soon as I was done with the school board, tons of pressure. There's, all these board members staring at you, firing questions at you. The superintendent gave me a newspaper and he said, you might want to look for an apartment, but they didn't say I was hired. So that was kind of I think that's a really cool story.
That is a cool story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a cool story. But you did bring up something that I think can be surprising, is how many people are in the room.
Yeah. I wasn't ready. I was not ready for that.
I've had interviews where there were 3, and I've had interviews where there were 12 or more. So it can be a surprise. Anybody else? Go ahead, Paul, Michelle, whoever, just talk.
Well, one of the problems the first year that you go in, you haven't had a lot of interview experience. And then if you land a job right away, and I did, you still don't have a lot of interview experience. The first job was for that small school district. And there were 3 people who interviewed you. There was the high school principal who asked 10 questions. You sat there patiently answering these 10 questions. Then he turned around and started over again and answered the 10 questions. And you went, what is your philosophy of discipline? And you went, and then he answered it. This is what you should have said. And I sat there and I went, uh-oh, I got 4 out of 10 right. I'm dead. And then you walked across and down to the elementary school, and the elementary principal has his feet up on the desk, comes, slaps you on the back, and he comes over and says, oh, this is very interesting. And he asks about you. So you say you're a musician. Are you temperamental? Now, I was not ready for that question. How do you answer that question? And what he was trying to say, I later found out, is they must have had some people who were musicians who apparently didn't do all of their job, meaning PTAs and open houses and the stuff you're supposed to do, because they had gigs and they were having trouble with that. And then the third interview was with the superintendent. Now I thought I was home free there. That was a traditional interview type questions. But then he handed me a loyalty oath. Now, yes, I know this is 1978. Did anybody had a loyalty oath handed to you? I promise, I swear, I am not a member of the Communist Party, and I will not try to do something that will follow the Constitution. And I was like, and I giggled. I was surprised. And that was a mistake, because he said, I must have heard the Stars and Stripes in the background. He gave me the greatest lecture of patriotism I've ever seen in my life. So I screwed up 4 out of 10 with the first guy. The second guy doesn't think I'm a temperamental. And the third guy, I just must have walked in it. And then they called me back and said, we want to hear if you could do this in 3 days. You're our first choice. So it was good news, but it was certainly 3 totally different interviews for the same school.
Definitely. Well, and you think about people interviewing nowadays, it'll all be online, it'll all be virtual.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a completely different experience as well.
I thought it was a great interview question. I was asked if they were to ask my best friend to describe me in 3 words, what would those 3 words be? Which was a good question. And then my first year out, I just sent applications everywhere, I felt I gained a lot of valuable experience. And but I also have some interview stories, but one of my favorite involves, I'm sure all of you know Scott Sheehan, and I interviewed at his job at Bald Eagle. So we went through the interview and they asked general education questions, and they said we have 10 music specific questions. So there were some terms to define. They were asking me some key signatures, and one of the questions they asked was who was, and I can't remember the name, so I'm just going to say John Doe. And they said, well, who's John Doe? And I said, I'm thinking, and I said, I don't know. And I said, can I have a couple minutes? They're like, well, we have a couple more questions. We'll come back to it. So I had to pass and then continued asking the questions, come back. And so they ask again, do you know who John Doe is? And I'm like, in my mind, what music philosopher? What is this? What method? And I'm going through all these things. And so I'm like, I'm sorry. And they're like, did you use grout for music history? And I'm like, I am. And I finally said, I am so embarrassed, but I don't know who this person is. And Scott and the other person that are interviewing burst out laughing. And here was the janitor at the school, and it was a question to see if you would answer the question honestly, or if you would just make up some garbage answer to say that you knew something. So I was just equally mad, but equally okay, yes, that's really funny. But it was a total fake question just to see if you were kind of an honest person.
Well, Michelle, now he's never going to be able to do that again.
I know. Well, it was at Bald Eagle. So, but yeah. So I think it's best. More of the story, always answer honestly. But I mean, they said people just are like, oh yes, they, the music, this learning theory, and blah blah blah, and they had people totally make up answers for that. So.
Wow, that is really telling. It also tells
it
would also tell someone in your position what they were getting themselves into.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
Yes, I've heard multiple stories of people asking questions that they're trying to see if you can say, I don't know, or there was actually for the replacement for my elementary band job, they asked the question to all of the candidates, how would you introduce altissimo range to your saxophones in 4th and 5th grade? And one of the persons laughed and said with earplugs, I get the joke, that's ridiculous. But other people, well, we'd start off in the fingering chart. And to me, I was a little mad because it was a musician trying to trick them. But at the same time, if you're not sure what altissimo range is in saxophone, well, I'd have to do some research to make sure that really is 4th and 5th grade appropriate. But in talking about how people are doing interviews on Zoom, I wish them extra opportunities to engage with a principal or a secretary, because I learned so much about various interviews waiting in the office for my turn, and you hear how the secretaries talk to each other, and you hear how things, just how the school behaves. And I remember doing one interview for a position where the band parents were very involved, and actually there were more band parents on that interview than there were administrators. And It was obvious throughout the interview that my music ed philosophy was not going to jive with this particular set of band parents, and I was fine with that. Like, okay, I stuck to my guns, and then as I walked away, the principal was a young lady, and you could tell the band parents were ready to the organization. She walked me to the door, and once we were past the door, she was like, "Thank you very much for your honesty, but I wouldn't expect a call back." And I'm like, I get that too, but just to be able to hear that from her, because she was like, "I really liked you," and but it was neat to have those opportunities, which you're going to miss out on Zoom. So you just have to really be trying to pick up as many human cues as possible if you're doing an online interview. Those are tough.
Good advice. So one question I had that totally threw me off, because I was totally in the education zone, was the simplest question in the world was, what's your favorite kind of music? That was the question. And I was like, and then I was like, well, do I admit that I like that? You know, because I was like, should I go like, you know, Hildegard von Bingen, or should I go like pop? Like, should I, like, what is the answer they're looking for, instead of just, you know, admitting what was in my, well, tape player at the time in my car. Okay. Oh, go ahead, Lisa. Yeah.
Even like to this day, like we do a lot of restorative justice in my district. So that's how they like to start in service with us in the beginning of the year. You know, you're in that big circle and there's always a music question. There's always like, what song do you listen to get pumped up or whatever, you know? And like the music teachers, like we'll just look at each other and like cringe, or like, oh, they want some really like good answer from us. It's just always that like, oh, I don't know. It's like you almost freeze. Like,
yeah, it's like being the music teacher on Jeopardy, right?
Yeah.
Which, did you guys just see the teacher tournament?
Mm-hmm.
All 3 finalists were humanities teachers. Yeah, 2 of them were music. Yeah. All right. What other people do you rely on to do your job?
I'm not gonna say to do my job, but like I know what you mean.
Yeah, rephrase it. Totally. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was gonna say I have like a go-to person in every grade level, like that one teacher that I know, like we think the same way, we have the same, you know, tendencies, and we approach issues the same way. So like I know in every grade level, I have one person I can go to and ask if it's something about curriculum, if it's something about discipline or making a relationship with a kid. I know I have a strong person in every grade level that can help me, and they won't judge me. And, you know, I feel comfortable just exposing myself to them.
That's nice to have.
Mm-hmm.
At the secondary level, I definitely say, I mean, in addition to the secretaries, because there's a lot of forms and things, you know, that I need, but our guidance counselors, especially with scheduling, it's really, really important. And I know this may sound too, but on a personal note, like I just think how much I rely on my spouse too, who's also a music teacher. And I think it's just that common understanding of the trials and tribulations of what we do. So I think that, you know, he certainly, you know, doing in the same profession, it's really nice to have someone that understands what a bad day means to me, or the parent email or something. So I think having that support system for me really sometimes it's what's most important.
We all need a mentor. I think we need a mentor at year 25 just as much as we need a mentor at 1 or 2. Now, sometimes those people come along in our lives and we don't really have a choice. They just happen, which is great. I mean, I've had administrators who are mentors, which is surprising. Got me involved in musicals. I had people who were secretaries who were mentors. I've had a wide variety of different people who gave us really good advice, told us the things we needed to hear, even if we didn't want to hear them. And leaving ourselves open for this. And that's one of the best things about Terry and her mentoring program, is that we have this resource. And actually, I have to say the retired members are ready to help people. You know, there are a lot of people out there that can step in and provide, you know, some of those questions you're afraid to ask, you wouldn't ask a principal. And maybe I'm just not reading this right. Like you said, a teacher in each building, that would be great. So we just need to all have a mentor. We need to be a mentee for someone, and we need to have our own mentor.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for the shout out. But I mean, there are 5 mentors here on this call right now, so it's not my program, but I appreciate that. Go ahead.
I wanted to piggyback on what Paul said. I was fortunate enough to have 3, and I was thinking about that earlier tonight, because each one of them filled a different role for me. I had a department colleague who worked side by side with me to get me through the everyday nuts and bolts of teaching. How to work lesson plans, how to get to know the rest of the staff. She was an established teacher in the district. I had a colleague who was 4 years older than me who taught the same thing that I did. And she could serve as my instrument, as my practical mentor, helping me through the nuts and bolts of teaching, because although I'm a string player, my string teaching courses were a grand total of 2. And so she was really able to help me through a lot of the nuts and bolts of teaching strings. And then my 3rd year of teaching, I had what I'd like to consider a social mentor. And this was the person who kind of really took me around the district, because by the time I reached my 3rd year of teaching, I was finally full-time in the district where I am now. Drove me around the district so I could see where everything was. And he was a lifelong resident of the district and was able to understand the various relationships at each building. And why some of the things that we saw, because he just knew the history of the area, and that really helped a lot. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one mentor, it could be several mentors.
Yeah. I think that, I don't know about anybody else here, but I like to do things myself. I like to get it done myself. And I really, for a long time, resisted getting help from anybody. It might not always make the job more efficient, but it does make the job easier when you accept that help from whoever is willing to give it. It's definitely nice. So, yeah. So when did you know that you were ready for the next step of education, like whether it was a certification or a graduate level study or just more credits in general? What drove you to advancing your education while you were teaching? Dr. Plum, you must have some sort of response to this.
I do, possibly. So I started working on my master's. I became interested in research, actually, and found a master's program in music ed. But I did a concentration on research. And then I found myself really involved in lots and lots and lots of different committees, involved in lots of community groups. And so I had this sort of a drive to research or start looking into leadership styles. I never wanted to be a principal. I considered being a, what do they call it? Like a head of arts, I guess you could say.
Like a department head?
I'm a department head, but like more of a, like an accounting system.
Supervisor.
Like a music supervisor.
Yeah, arts supervisor or something like that. I considered that. I got really interested in leadership and just different styles, to be honest with you. I kind of thrive on learning, so and exploring, so, because it opens up like so many more things. So I actually became through looking at leadership styles, I got really into decision making. So like all of this stuff, has helped me in my career, even though it wasn't music, even though my last degree wasn't music focused. It really helped in my career. So to answer your question, how did I know when? For me, it was just basically a thirst for knowledge. Yeah, I think that's the answer.
Sue, were you going to share something, or Katie, whoever?
Okay.
Go ahead, Sue.
Okay. I promised myself that as soon as I landed somewhere full-time, I would start my graduate work. And that's what I did. So I was fortunate. I had my graduate degree fairly early on, but I still every summer try to take a class. I just finished, I consider myself a lifelong learner. I just finished a second master's degree in a field totally outside of music, but so much that I have learned, I've been able to apply to what I'm doing. And I think it's important to really encourage everybody to continue learning, because things change. You need to grow as a person, you need to grow as a teacher. And to just kind of sit there and dig in your heels and say, well, this is what I did in college and I don't need to do any more. I don't think that's it's not a good attitude. It does you no good, and it really does not help your students either. So
I'm going to piggyback off on that sentence then. If you're going to do an online, like continuing education, make sure you're also doing things where you are interacting with people. Me, after my first job, I taught elementary for 5 years. And then because of connections I had with the East Stroudsburg Commissioning Series, and actually my assigned mentor from my first year teaching, she kind of kicked me in the butt and said, Katie, you need to talk to Jack Stamp about, while he was visiting, saying you should ask him about master's programs. And that's what led me to go to IUP for my master's degree. And but making those connections through the people you work with, like other music teachers in your area, PMEA within your district, PMEA at the state level, you're going to make those connections to see what other people are doing. And you're going to, oh, this does make sense. I don't have to feel like I know every wind band piece ever known to man to get a master's degree in wind band literature. Just by talking to the other people is so valuable to know that you're not alone in those insecurities or awareness of how much smarter you are than your first year than you are your second year.
Katie, you reminded me of something. I also was driven by setting an example for my students. So, my goal is to get a 4.0. I got a 3.97. It doesn't matter. But to set the example for my students, to see them. I wanted to show them that I could struggle but make it through. So it was during that time I explained I learned everything in 5th grade band that I needed to know to get through a doctoral study. So I tried to use a lot of those examples, like the grit, the stick-with-itness, all that stuff that's wrapped up in what we do. I forgot to mention that. It was kind of important.
So in an effort to maintain your sanity, what's something that you do that has, with your time, that has absolutely nothing to do with your job?
Well, Terry knows that I'm a foodie, so I'd love to. We've gone on some fun trips. So I really like to try new recipes myself, and also do restaurants and go places. But so in addition to being a foodie, my family, we love to travel. Not this summer, but our son is 9. He's been to 24 states. So we think the world is so big. So each year we try to go someplace different. So travel and cooking are my 2 go-tos. And reading, I like to read a lot too.
And Nadia is a world traveler and hiker. Sounds awesome. Anybody else want to share?
I like mechanical stuff, like cars, anything that moves with motors. I love it.
I feel like I'm living vicariously through my daughters. They're both in Girl Scouts, and I never did Girl Scouts growing up. So even though it's probably not helping my sanity to be around that many young girls, I'm learning things, and it's giving me that Girl Scout experience I didn't have growing up.
Cool.
The getting a pet, but I think a lot of us are teachers. During my career, I could not have had a pet because both my wife and I had those really long rehearsals, and we'd be home late, coming home and dragging our butts in there at 10. Now we have 2 little doggies, a Bichon Frise and a Yorkie Poodle. And I have to say that my whole life seems to center around these 2 children. And it really doesn't matter, you come home or you come into the room, they can't believe, oh, you're back. And it's like the most amazing thing. I probably throw more time into that than anything else.
Yes, and Katie has a good point. Cats can handle the music teacher lifestyle. So true, Katie. So true.
Yes,
And you can get as many as you want.
that is true.
All right, I have one more for you guys. So, assuming you've been in the position you have for a little bit now, how has that position itself changed over the years? Right, and the point here is the same as it's been, is that you're going to survive whatever happens. So let's hear some of those crazy stories about how your position has changed. Nadia, good point. You're asked to sub. That is something new. Well, for me, some years I'm at 2 buildings, some years I'm at 4 buildings. And so that like the literal buildings that I'm going to changes, the amount of students I have, which presents the challenge of getting to know them better, because I might have had them the year before, but I might not have had them the year before. So that's something that's changed in the position. Has anybody had radical changes, like all of a sudden you have to do elementary too, or now you're the string teacher as well, or anything like that? Go ahead, Katie.
I don't have that radical, but when I started at my current position 11 years ago, there was a full-time, or basically full-time music secretary that had been in the district, and it was just like assigned to my building. So it's kind of like my position's music secretary, but she also helped out with some other people. And 3 years after I started working there, her husband got a job in Florida. She moved, and that was when most districts weren't replacing people. And so she has never been replaced. And since then, our musical director has retired, our stage manager has retired, nobody else has stepped up. So I have been absorbing more and more jobs because there literally is nobody else that is willing to be a part of this. And so it's just the jobs do compound. But what's fun is and it does get overwhelming sometimes, but then there's other days when you're like, but I like this new challenge, and look at this, I have to learn new things. So like you can get really frustrated with it, but I couldn't have done it my first year at this position, but I survived, well, until March 13th, I was surviving another year of that. So you do get smarter every year. And so therefore you might be able to handle some of those new changes.
Great points. Thank you.
I think too, I've been in my current school 19 years, and we've had a lot of administrative changes, and just how a difference that a principal can make in a building, whether they bring a lot of, lifting up or pushing against the faculty. And when you work in multiple buildings, the different styles of a principal. So there's been times I feel like I was on cloud 9, and then there's other times that, I counted how many days I haven't seen a particular principal in a row, and I'm like, yeah, I made it another day. So it's just, it's just the vibe of how your building can change depending on who is the administrator there.
Yeah, another good point.
A little bit different twist on things. My wife actually reminded me this of today. We had a long-time music teacher at the high school for 30 years, and he suddenly passed of cancer while teaching. The students knew him very well. The whole community knew him real well. And the type of change that put me into is that I was kind of when I say stable person, I hope no one takes that as I'm God's gift to, do you understand what I mean? So I had a lot of those high school students actually coming to me for support. So I really had to step out of my music shoe. Well, I mean, not like we don't, do this for children anyways, but I found myself having to really change, at least through the next two or 3 years, and just be a little bit more of a something for those kids who knew him to lean on. So it kind of changed a little bit for me, not a position change, but more of like a role change, I guess you can say. because, you know, they hired a new teacher and there was little trust because, you know, the trust wasn't built. It's just a brand new teacher. And the other teachers were across campus, so they were never seen. So I was the one seen as that, you know, that shoulder to lean on. That's what I was looking for, not, yeah.
That's also a good point.
I know that my leadership role has changed. I'm the department coordinator for our department in my school district, and my leadership role has changed a lot over the last 11 years. It used to be that they kind of left all the special areas alone. We were allowed to do our own thing. Now we all have to work in lockstep, and trying to explain that to my people, especially as we were coming through the pandemic, they were very offended. And I find that I have to do a lot of relationship building now, much, much more than I've ever had to do before. And I'll be honest with you, coming through the pandemic was hard because there was a lot of resentment, and trying to override all of that resentment, you know, trying to explain to my general music colleagues who were not allowed to teach on Zoom as opposed to the instrumental side that was challenging. And our district has recently, over the last 2 years, decided that everything must now be top down and protocols must be followed. And that's also different for us because we were kind of always used to being able to, you know, email the curriculum person and say, hey, where are my materials? Now they can't do that anymore. And it's been difficult to really say to people, I'm sorry, but this is what we need to do now, when people are so not used to doing that. So that's been a big change for us.
Yeah, and Nadia also commented on the change that happened with the online learning. I'm pleased to discover that you enjoyed that, Nadia. That's great. It's a wonderful thing to be able to discover about yourself. That's good. Well, does anyone have anything else they want to bring up, discuss, ask, chat about?
Well, I wanted to say to Paul, thank you for that book recommendation that was in the news this issue. I'm reading it now. It was really good. It is really good.
I have to say it's appropriate at this time. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's a great book. And if you haven't seen Paul's review yet, you should read it, and then maybe read the book too, because the book really brings home a lot of good points. So thank you for that.
I bought it as soon as he told me about it.
Paul's full of good ideas. We can see you, Paul. All right. Well, hey, for one final time, don't forget the PMEA Mentor Program. We're here for whatever you need, whether it's a one-time need or you want to establish a relationship. We can certainly work with whatever your needs are. You get in touch just by emailing me, tmyers@altoonasd.com, and just let me know what you need, and I'll help you find the right mentor for you, the right person to answer all your needs. So thank you to PMEA for offering that to all of our teachers, to the entire membership. So thank you very much to everybody that was here tonight for participating in the conversation, especially to our mentors that are here tonight. Thanks for giving us that time. You're welcome, Nadia.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a great night.